Welcome to the e-commerce growth show, brought to you by Segmentify.
So, dear friends, welcome to another Grow e-commerce show. Today's speaker is Mr. Federico Cesconi, and he is CEO and co-founder of 3Sensive company. This is number one in artificial intelligence customer experience management SaaS platform. He's also in love with NLP using transformers, a writer at Hacker Noon and Hyperstore.com, his first e-commerce domain, already registered in 1994. So today's his presentation will be about measuring and managing digital journeys after COVID-19. So listen to him about what is secret behind digital and what it means. So, Mr. Cesconi, please, the stage is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. As you mentioned, today's presentation is basically focused on digital transformation, and one important aspect of digital transformation is certainly the customer journey. We will understand later what does it mean exactly digital journey, but customer journey and the customer are very important. The whole presentation is based on a paper, and the paper is a paper that I just published together with a friend of mine at the Polytechnic University of Milan, and if you want to get your free copy of the paper, just email me and I will be more than happy to give you basically this paper. What we basically identified as a problem, and we wanted to better understand and to solve with our research. Basically, we focus on two specific pieces of information. On one part, we know that a huge amount of digital transformation fail, and this is basically a figure that we got from McKinsey. 84%, according to them, 84% of digital transformation fail. On the other hand, what we discovered in our research was 50% of CEO today, they don't have in their hands a good metric in a way that they can really measure and assess where they stand today with this digital transformation. So the question we ask ourselves is, how do companies measure the enormous effort and investment associated with digital transformation? And what Alexandra said before is extremely important in terms that after COVID, and we have seen also during the lockdown, and hopefully we will not experience the same in the coming weeks, even though the numbers are really bad. But basically, during the COVID, the needs, to digitalize and to transform the customer journey and make them in a not totally different way, in a way that the New York Times has defined the touchless economy, then it becomes a must. So, companies to survive, they have to change the customer journey to make them digital, and of course, in the meantime, they need to measure this digital effort. So what also we identify as a threats in this process, and there are certain aspects that we have considered. So first of all, a lot of company basically think about digital transformation as a small project, A small team is not something that is basically considered for the whole company or considered as a long marathon. So basically say, okay, it will be a continuous effort probably for the next 5 years. So no one wants to start with this idea and they think, okay, we can digitalize very, very fast. Everything is not a problem. This is not the truth. Transformation is a marathon, not a sprint. The second important point I discovered, and here I base this point also on my experience working more than now 15 years in the area of customer experience management, is you must have a clear strategic objective in place. So a big pictures where we want to go on a strategic point of view, but what you have to basically execute, so the tactic parts of this strategy must be in very small chunks. So don't start with a big bang, because big bang means big fail, as we have seen before. So you really need to start, to execute this big strategy in chunk. The third important point, and here we go back again to what you, Alexander, said before, and what we have seen in the COVID-19. Everything that you do in the digital transformation area and in managing the customer journey must be considered from the customer point of view and the expectations you want for your customers. And here, I always say, because I laugh when people tell me, we want to delight our customers. We want to create the wow effects to our customers. That is not the point. The point is you have to promise something that you can maintain and the customer can basically benchmark back to you. So a stupid example, I don't know, here in Switzerland, we have, for instance, Lidl. Lidl is a grocery stores, a big network of grocery stores, and basically, they will never delight their customers, because the customer expectations are not that I'm delighted by Lidl, but I go to Lidl and I find the same brands that I can find in other shops with a 20–30% price difference. So, but in the meantime, they are quite successful, even though the customer experience is not a wow experience, but they deliver the customer experience that they promise. So this is third point, very, very important. Understand what basically you want to achieve and you want to promise to your customer in this area. Let's go then to the measure. So what are the entities we want to measure, and what kind of relationship we have between these measures? So in particular, if you think about what we want to measure in this digitalization of the customer journey, are three very important aspects. On top, for sure, our client, our customers. We want to basically understand if the client or customers is basically satisfied and he wants really he appreciate and our offering, our digital journey meet or even exceed the expectation, the expectation of the customer. On the other angle, you have the customer journey. So really the ability to measure the customer journeys. And the third entity is the technology, because at the end, the enabler between, a customer journeys and, a very satisfied customers in our digital world in this after COVID-19 is the technology. So those are the three aspects we want basically to measure. There is one more complexity, because if we think about customer journeys, we always think about, the classical approach to customer journey. So on one side, we have the physical customer journey. On the other side, we have the digital journey. And before COVID, they were quite two totally different worlds. But, the lockdown and the experience we are having with this, pandemic, tell us exactly the difference. So we cannot anymore think about two different worlds, the analog worlds and the digital worlds, but the journey or the experience we are going to erogate to our clients is definitely a mix of the two. And for this reason now, people in customer experience field, they talk about this phygital experience, phygital journey. So the real mix or a seamless experience between, digital and physical episodes. And with this last word, I basically introduced the next important concept in this phygital journey world. So how basically we can manage those episodes. And the episode at the end of the day, and is related to one of the big risks we have seen at the beginning. So the fact that we have also to basically chunk, the actions we want to improve in the customer journeys must be in small pieces. The episode, I have to be honest, is not something that basically I introduced or I invented, but it comes from Bain & Co. And Bain & Co. basically introduced this concept of the customer episodes. You can go online, you can search for customer episodes Bain & Co. But basically they define specific episodes, so specific small events. If you want, we can talk to them about touch point, but a really event that the customers pass through in a way to achieve something. So it could be, for instance, the customer wants to pay an invoice. This is an episode. And the way I pay the invoice can be through multiple channels, can be a mix of physical and digital worlds, but at the end of the day should be seamless for the final client, should be the final client will measure this experience, how easy it is to pay the invoice, because if it's extremely easy, I will be very satisfied. I save a lot of time, and basically I'm happy. And how fast I do this? I give you a stupid example. I don't know if in your country Zalando is one of the e-commerce guy. Here in Switzerland is Zalando. In Germany, I think, in Austria, in other European countries, is really a big retailer of clothes, and now they deliver a lot of things. They have really a very good experience, because you can order whatever you want, and then you have the ability to send back, everything. And one day I was in the train, and I'm 55 years old, so usually I do everything on my desktop or laptop, and my kids works a lot with the phones, but I'm a little bit old style and I prefer to use the desktop. But I was in the train and I said, okay, let's see if I can send back, these clothes at Zalando using the phone app. And I opened the app. It was extremely easy for me, to create this, information to send back certain items of my shipment that I didn't like. And I was really positive surprised, because I said, okay, first of all, it was extremely easy. For me, the effort was really, really low. I save a lot of time because I did it when I was on the train going to work, and or I read some news, or I did something smarter, and in that case I did something smarter to save time in my life. And and at the end, the journey or the specific episode was so nice and so easy, and surprised to me how easy it was, that at the end create also a kind, if you want, a kind of loyalty link towards the brand of Zalando. So that is to explain the episodes and explain basically what Bain say when you have to manage the episode. And if we can summarize this, you will see that basically the impact of digitalization, like the Zalando example I did, the impact of this digitalization on episodes, basically it reduces more or less in three categories. So the execution speed, so be able to manage the journey, like in my case of Zalando, that I was immediately able to reduce steps in Zalando journeys by really sending back the goods on my phone while I was on the train. B, in execution of my journey as a customer, in terms that it was really a great experience, because then I had all the information to trace my change in my customer journey. So I received an email telling me, okay, don't worry, we know that you want to send back these goods, and as soon as you bring these goods to the post, you will receive another email where you can trace your shipment. All this kind of information makes my journey a better journey, my phygital journey a better journey. The third important point that I have already told you before is basically be very careful on setting the right expectation. So as I said, we are not here to wow or delight the customer, because probably a lot of experts in customer experience will say, okay, but sending back some goods doesn't wow your customer. Sure, doesn't wow, but if it's done in a proper way, and if the customer will find this experience easy and quick, then you will wow your customer. You don't know that, but you will wow your customer. We always tend to overcomplicate, this satisfaction aspect, of the customer experience. But sometimes when you will deliver very solid experience on very simple things, and it's easy and it's fast for your client, you will get exactly the wow effect that you expect without, investing a huge amount of money and then becoming negative, in the revenues that you get with that customer. So the digitalization and the phygital journey means also, be able to control and to produce a very solid experience towards your customers. So going back and try to put everything a little bit together. If we consider the phygital journey, if we consider the customer, and then we consider, as we have seen in the previous slides, the technology that support the whole process, then we have to consider two aspects that the customer in the episode measurement. So on one side, and here I have really to basically give credits to the co-author of the paper, which is my friend Gianpaolo, and basically he's the guy that has created the concept on how to measure correctly the episode in the digital experience. So on one side you have the customer side of the episode, so what the customer basically see interacting with the company on certain episodes. So in my specific case, I mentioned before, it was the app of Zalando. So that was the front end, but in the background you have the company side. So Zalando put me or give me the power to do something in the front end, but at the end of the day, in the back end, there were technology that allow me to do something. So this is basically how we split the episode and how we wanted to measure the episode in a way to understand how the phygital journey become. Then basically in a very, very easy way, then if you want, you can basically read my paper. Is written much better than how I am explaining right now. But basically you have this situation where on one side, on the right side, you see an episode that is full analog. An episode that is full analog basically is dependent in the front end, because the front end, the customer is not empowered to do something, and manual in the back end. So there is not a technology to support this episode. While in a full digital episode, you see on the left side, the customer is totally independent, like in my case with Zalando, and in the digital, in the back end, the digital is fully automated. So having in mind this, having in mind, okay, the entities we have seen before, having in mind what we want to measure on a digital transformation, then we are really able to put together all the dots and to put in place different measures. So let's have a look now. I don't want to basically go and explain you in detail every aspect of the measure that we put in place. And as I said, I'm really happy to provide you a copy of the paper, and you can see all the mathematical formula to basically put together these figures. But as you can see, on one side we measure journey and episodes. So you can see, for instance, in the journey purchase, which is the 7 and 8 on the first table, I have receive order, track order. So inside the purchase journey, I have two specific sub episodes. But for each episode, I'm able to measure the KPIs that you see on the square on the right side, which are the digital transformation index, the customer frustration index, the digital perceived usefulness, the digital perceived ease of use, and the digital customer experience index. And all these figures basically can be measured, you understanding, what I explained you before. So, what you have in the technology in the background, what you empower the customer in the front end, and also, of course, capturing the feedback of the customers. And this gives you a real, real view of where we stand today with the digital transformation process, and how we manage today, the different phygital journey. You can see, for instance, if we take now, of course, it's just an example, but if we take the digital transformation index on top, we are at 0.56, or we can say 56%, and the goal is to become, of course, 100%. So we have still a lot to do in the digital transformation index. We see that on the customer frustration, which is the point of view of the customers on the episodes, we have still room of improvement, because we have 0.43 or 43%, while we need to reach 0. And then we have the different index from the point of view on how the customer perceive the digitalization on the specific episode. So imagine today, of course, I did it something very simple to show you, but imagine today, as a CEO or a C-level, you have a cockpit, and every morning you can basically access a cockpit that tells you, okay, where we stand today in general on our digital transformation, our customers are satisfied versus all the digital journeys that we have around, and what are basically the main perception of the customer versus the digital index. So this is a very small things, and as I said, if you like to go deep, I have a paper for that. Now, to summarize and to wrap up everything, so a very simple schema that helps maybe to better understand. So we see in the digital worlds, we want to understand episodes. So we want to understand basically the episode that the customer goes through, like the one I explained you related to Zalando. This episode is split into areas. So what is the customer facing? So is the customer empowered by itself to execute that specific episode? And the backend, is the backend fully automated, or do we have people in the backend that works on every request of our customers? And on the other side, on the left side, we have what I call the customer's perception versus the specific episode, and in particular versus the technology. So at the end of the day, if I think my example I explained you before, for me, the two important aspects of my experience sending back my goods at Zalando using the app was extremely useful, because I could save a lot of time, and I did it, in a time that I was not expected, to perform that action. But on the other end, it was extremely easy for me, and this created, a very big satisfaction, and as I said before, a link, to the brand that is really hard to break unless you offer me a better experience. Let me just finish with the last sentence. I don't know how we stay at the moment about time, because when I start,
it's okay.
Okay, because I'm Italian. When I start to talk, it's very hard to stop me. But basically, I can tell you also give you another real example. So my kids, they suggested me to get Revolut as a credit card, and I went to the Google Play Store, I download the app, and then I follow the steps basically to subscribe. And as I said, I'm an old man, and I was basically let's say my previous experience was always to fill out a lot of paper form or PDF, and then sign, put in an envelope, send to the bank, and then wait for 3 weeks, and then we get back something. So I went in that app, and basically I had to take a pictures of my ID, take a picture of myself, click a button, and after 15 minutes I received my virtual card. After 3 or 4 days, my physical card, in the post. And I mean, if you think about, the schema I show you right now. So if you think about the left side, for me, the usefulness was unbelievable, because of course I compare
no bureaucracy,
something,
right?
yeah, exactly, but very, but at the same time very easy, you know, to execute. So my perception is easy of use is extremely high. So this basically, in my opinion, when we think, and I go back to what you said at the beginning, when we think about the COVID-19 and what kind of experience we have to design and provide in the COVID-19, we really, in my opinion, but of course I try to sell my idea, we really need to think about this aspect. So on one side, the episode, the customer facing and the back end, and on the other end, the point of view of the customer. So inside out, outside in, perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. And having said that, I want just to remember you, when you think about customer and customer experience, that you know, remember that being human is a good business. So we always think about, we don't have consumers, we don't have client, we have human being like us, and we have to deal with all the emotions and everything related to the fact that we deal with human beings. So thank you very much, you know, for the time you gave me.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add, according to your closing, sometimes I'm joking that now with the COVID virus, we are not anymore in customer experience era, but more in human experience era. I have also some questions here for you.
Yeah.
And what is actually, because I mean, it seems that kind of a paradox with virus, COVID, it has also become kind of a medicine for acceleration of the digitalization. And what is actually the biggest progress and the difference between the leaders and laggards in the digitalization from your point of view?
It's a very difficult question. First of all, definitely, you know, the pandemic situation has generated, you know, a black swan that no one was ready, you know, to manage. But at the end, it forced all, you know, the companies around the world to think about how we can become more digital, you know, how we can basically do the same in remote working. And in my opinion, has shown and has become a big acceleration for all, you know, digital transformation. I read somewhere in LinkedIn that, you know, starting from, it was during the lockdown, starting from today, you know, the person, the C-level responsible for digital transformation in every organization will be the COVID-19. So basically, you know, he forced us to transform. For me, you know, the question you asked me, it's really hard to answer from my, from my side, but I explain you why, because I'm always, I'm a passionate visionary, you know. But you mentioned in my presentation, I registered my first domain in '94, and I was in the United States in '93, and I've seen this HTTP, and I see this strange, you know, email address, and I said, what's this? You don't know, it's the internet. What is the internet? And they explained me, and I come back to Europe, and I said, these things will revolutionize the world. And I try, you know, you said I registered my first domain was Hyperstore. My idea was to open an e-commerce mall, so similar to Amazon, but no one trusts me in my idea. So when you ask me, you know, why companies are not basically seeing this change in digitalization, it's hard to me to explain why they don't do it, because you must be a visionary and you need to change to change this?
Second question, as I have read, there is in your white paper research that you mentioned, there is actually minimum 24 clicks against 120 clicks to open an account. This is still enormous difference. So how can we, or what is your suggestion, how to improve this kind of digital improvement for companies to be on a fast track, because such things occur every day?
Yeah, this is an excellent point, Alexandra. When you design your digital experience, or when you know, re-engineering, you know, in general, the journey, you really need to measure how many interaction the customers has. And remember, every interactions you can avoid is best for your customer, because as you mentioned, now I don't remember.
The less is more, right?
the less is more, exactly, because if I can, you know, it's like the famous one-click checkout at Amazon. You do just one click and you check out. That's the rule, you know. Less click, less you know, interaction, better is. So this is the real answer.
And the last question for you, as you said, already in '94, you were quite a visionary person. So let's say that, as people are saying, actually, that vaccine for COVID will be probably out in a year or more. Do you think that everything will go back or stay? What will happen? What will, or any kind of new journeys there? What is your
is a very
fortune teller thing?
Is a very, 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 very interesting questions, because you know, I think, you know, we are trying to live now in what I call what the New York Times called the touchless economy. So and maybe in this moment we are living in a kind of excess, if you want, in a kind of excess of security, avoid you know, contact and things like that. But my point is, you know, I seen you know, around people saying something like, we go back to the normal, but we will never back to the normal, if normal is what we had before the COVID, because we will go back to a new normal, which is totally different from the normal we had before. So inevitably, this experience has changed something for us. For instance, I can tell you some practical things, you know. Despite we are a, you know, a SaaS company, and we have 5 different locations around Europe, we tended before always to be in the office and work in the office, in the different offices we had. Right now, with the experience we passed, we realized that you can work wherever you want, as you have an internet connections, and you can be connected. So when we go back, and we have already decided, we will ask our employees to say maximum 2 days in the office, and they can work wherever they want, at home or you know, where they want. So this will change, and will change everywhere. We change. You know, in the hands of the consumers interacting with companies. So don't expect this as change. I would say probably is an evolution, probably something, I don't want to enter in the philosophical discussion, but something that we had to pass through, and it has teach, in my opinion, a lot of also positive things, not just negative things.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for such interesting insight in this COVID era and digital experience. So it was really our honor and pleasure to have you on this interview. And dear friends and fans of Grow E-commerce Show, please check also the white paper that Federico suggested. You can find it, you can send him an email and he will send it to you. So thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye.